Recently, I showcased an indie action RPG by the name of Ghostlore. This game has just launched into early access, and while the development of the game is ongoing, it's currently quite a lot of fun. So I made a quick video documenting some of the recent changes the devs made, going from the version of beta that I'd played originally to the current version that was released for early access. In the short time since then, the game has already gotten several revisions to fix issues and improve gameplay. I also did a livestream where I was going through the Hellgate system, the game's endgame. You can kind of think of it like Diablo's Greater Rifts, where the numbers get bigger and the enemies get stronger, or, to use an example more familiar to people on my channel, Path of Exile's Delve. And during the stream, I got quite a few questions about my build. So, today's video is going to focus on my build. Like with most of my Path of Exile builds, I wanted something that was fast, strong, and not a complete glass cannon. I found that I did so much damage with such wide-reaching range that I probably didn't need defenses, but I was going to have them anyway. Initially, this was to defend against thorns. The reflected damage that I did to myself was far scarier than the damage the enemies were doing to me. One of the recent revisions nerfed thorns damage, at least for now, as of 0.303c, so that's no longer a problem. As a result, I've dropped some defenses to add even more speed and even more damage. Most of my damage comes from the Seeker Talisman skill. Seeker Talisman deploys several projectiles which then home in on enemies. If you ever played Winter Orb in Path of Exile, then this feels very much the same. If the Seeker Talisman pierces an enemy, then it continues to seek and continues to fire at new enemies until it runs out of pierces. You can kind of think of this as Winter Orb with old explodey chests, and it's absolutely as fast as that might sound. Some of the other skills I'm using include Shroud of Darkness from the Hashashin class. This is a massive move speed buff, giving me 263% move speed for 4 seconds, and it gives me a stealth, so I can walk past enemies that are just too far beneath my level to be worth fighting. And the other skill that I use a lot is Mandala, which places a magical symbol on the ground. Think of it as Rune of Power from World of Warcraft. You stand in the rune and you do more damage. Not that this build really needs to do more damage. The other skills I have are Radiant Spears, a Sentinel skill that deals high damage at long range, until I realized Seeker Talismans were just far better, but I keep it around just in case I waste all of my Seeker Talisman charges and need something else to spam, because it has a low cooldown and a very low MP cost. I also have Chakram, which hits fairly hard, but is kind of difficult to aim, and ultimately not really worth it. It is, however, very much worth using still, because it gives you a passive crit multi-bonus when you spec into the skill. And then finally, I have Dashing Strike just to have a little bit extra mobility. Again, this is something that I don't really need, but I have the skill points and I needed the passives from the Hashashin class, so I wanted it anyway. Speaking of looking at passives, I'm fully invested into Radiant Spears. This gives me access to the skill, and for each skill point allocated, I get 4% increased projectiles, which is a global buff, so it affects my Seeker Talismans. Chakram gives a global buff per point allocated of 10% crit multi, which again affects everything that you do, so it's a very good investment. From the Hashashin, I of course have fully specced out Shroud of Darkness, not only because it's pretty awesome, but because you get 5% crit chance. This is how I get to 100% chance to deal a critical strike. I do also have a few points in Dashing Strike. This is because I didn't know what else to do with them. Everything dies, and I couldn't think of another way to min-max, so I just tossed them into Dashing Strike. Then in Exorcist, I'm of course fully speccing out Seeker Talismans. This gives me global accuracy, which I don't really need because accuracy is kind of inflated on my gear, but it causes Seeker Talisman to deal a lot more damage, pierce enemies, and fire additional projectiles. The remainder of my points are into the Mandala skill, since I want as much aura effect as possible from it. When it comes to a passive tree, I'm taking all 4 of the Sentinel passives, so that I have some HP regen. Sharpshooter gives me 50% more damage, since most of the time my talismans will be at least 2 units away from enemies. +1 Pierce, which is of course very good for talismans. Think of it as +1 enemy killed. And Marksmanship, which gives 30% accuracy and 30% crit multi. From the Hashashin class, I have nothing personal. This is a massive amount of damage right now. I believe it's bugged as it's giving me around 270% crit multi, and it says 50%. It's not 50% more, i.e. it's not multiplying, it's not adding a flat 50. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I suspect this will be looked into and potentially fixed in the near future. Finisher, which causes enemies below 15% health to be killed instantly. This is, well, 15% more damage. And Analyze Weakness, which removes enemy absorb. I don't really think I need Analyze Weakness, but Chain Kill doesn't do very much for me, and I was going to put the points somewhere, so I decided it might as well go there. For Exorcist, I also have 3 passives, starting with Purify. Enemies that you defeat are resurrected as allies. This is handy not because they do that much damage, but because they're essentially disposable meat shields. Near-death experience at low health, remove all inflictions and gain absorption. The absorption is far too low to actually matter, but removing all inflictions when I fall to 30% health is very good for dealing with poison, burn, and other damage over time effects. Then finally Sixth Sense, because this way I don't have to buy as many potions, or use as many of the potions that I've picked up. The compound glyphs that I've been prioritizing are Ilo, Alasa, and then making sure that I have at least one Moku. Ilo's good since with the Utala glyph you get 4% crit chance, with Sona you get 15% crit multi, and then with Pakala, Kasi, Seli, or Tello, you get flat damage, which of course increases the damage that you do. Alasa is also incredibly helpful, since with Sona you get 4 to 6 skill damage, this does affect the damage your Secret Talismans do, and with Pakala you get 50% projectile pierce, which is really good, since projectile pierce is how this build gets so much of its damage. The reason I wanted one Moku is so that I can get the HP steal, the MP steal, and the HP and MP on hit. Having both HP and MP on hit is great for my recovery, since 9 projectiles from Secret Talisman ends up being a lot of hits. In terms of stats that I'm looking for, flat skill damage is the thing to prioritize both for affixes on your gear and affixes on your glyphs. After that, other useful stats are crit chance if you need it, skill damage, and crit multi. Flat damage is also okay, but not the best. Defensively speaking, the best stats to get are block, avoidance, and maximum HP. Absorb is also okay, but this build does not excel in stacking absorb, so getting a ton of it probably won't be possible. I also do have a few resistances, but I wasn't really going after them, since now that I don't have to worry about my own reflected thorns damage, the enemies don't really get to hit me enough for resistances to matter all that much. But with future patches, this could change, in which case you'll want 75% fire, ice, lightning, and poison resist. If you're trying to do as much damage as possible, your gearing priority should be getting as much flat skill damage as you can, then 100% crit chance, then skill damage and crit multi. You'll get a lot of skill damage from Sona glyphs, so it's a little bit less valuable than the other stats. Avoidance gives you a chance to dodge attacks, and attacks that are dodged deal reduced damage. Then I also like block, since attacks that are blocked deal no damage. It should be noted, in-game it says no limit. If you get to 100% chance to block, you do not become immune to damage, and this is a very good thing. Beyond that, some other stats to look out for are increased projectiles, pierce chance, maximum skill uses, and of course, cooldown reduction per hit. Cooldown reduction per hit is very nice since you hit a ton with Secret Talismans, and it'll fully recharge your skills as you're hitting enemies. I strongly suspect that both Secret Talismans and cooldown reduction per hit may see some balance adjustments in the future, so if you're watching this video a few months from now, do keep that in mind. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how the build plays and some best practices. But before I do, a quick reminder that if you've been enjoying this video or you want to see more build guides for Ghostlore, then leave a like and let me know what skills you might want to see a guide on. And for more action RPG content, then be sure to sub to the channel and ring that bell to be notified whenever I upload. So now, the playstyle. There's really two ways to do it. The first is the stealth route, where you use Shroud of Darkness and you mostly just run past enemies. This is incredibly fast and it's very good for pushing late into Hellgates. And in fact, it's often better to not kill every enemy on your screen. You can just run past them and look for something more important like the end boss. I currently have 13 charges, which means I get 13 4-second windows where I can just run through everything. If I do stop, what I'll do is load up a bunch of Secret Talismans and then watch them cascade through enemies. It feels very much like playing an explodey build in Path of Exile. Now, when you're dealing with a boss, do keep in mind they won't immediately spawn when you get close if you have Shroud of Darkness active. I'm guessing this is to prevent players from cheesing the boss with Shroud of Darkness. This means you have an opportunity to drop Mandala, stand in your circle, and deploy all of your charges of Secret Talismans. Don't worry, they'll recharge by the time you go into the next level, and they'll do a massive amount of damage to the boss. For reference, a lot of the bosses I'm fighting have 100 to 200,000 health, and they die instantly. I don't really know how much DPS I could do, because there's nothing in the game with enough health, at least at the levels that I've gotten to, that can actually withstand my DPS for long enough for me to do any testing. I know in terms of single crits from Secret Talismans, I've seen 5, 6, even 7,000 per. Remember, 9 projectiles per cast. From something like Radiant Spears, we're talking about 30,000 or even upwards of 40,000 if I'm standing in my buff effect. If you've played a Headhunter build in Path of Exile, if you've played Winter Orb, or really any other fast build, then a lot of the gameplay here will feel really familiar. You're super fast, and your goal is to zoom around maps and then absolutely obliterate the boss. Ghostlore's endgame might not have as much depth as PoE, but it's very satisfying and incredibly fun. I've played a lot of classic-style ARPGs, and I've played a lot of indie ARPGs, and in this regard, Ghostlore stands out. It has some of the most PoE-like endgame out of any of the games I've played. The only other one that ever felt like it came close was Last Epoch, and that game leans much more towards the PoE style rather than a classic game like Ghostlore, which is very clearly heavily inspired by Diablo 2. So if you want something that looks and feels a lot like Diablo 2, but has those PoE levels of zoom, then check this build out. Now all that said, I wouldn't be surprised if Secret Talismans or other areas of a build were nerfed or changed in the future. The game is currently in early access, but it's undergoing development, including a lot of updates. So if you're coming across this video later, don't expect everything to necessarily be the same. I will try to document changes in the comments below, in a pinned comment, or in the description. Keep an eye out for that. And now, as a special thanks to everyone who stuck around this long, I'm going to tell you a secret. If anyone from the Ghostlore team is watching, don't worry, the video's over. I promise there's nothing beyond this point. There's no secrets that I'm going to reveal about this build that you shouldn't know about. Definitely don't keep watching. Time to click away. Alright, I think they're gone. So now, what is the secret? The secret is that this build does so much damage that you don't need Secret Talismans. That's right. If you want to use Radiant Spears, or Dervish, or a number of other things, this build's still super awesome. So unless player damage is toned down by a lot, such as removing skill damage from some items or from Glyphs, removing the ability for Glyphs to roll as rare or even legendary items, or a number of other things such as caps to crit chance or multi, this build probably won't be changing anytime soon, even if Secret Talismans themselves are nerfed. So if you've seen this video, or one of my previous videos, and check Ghostlore out for yourself, what build did you play, and how good was it? Let me know how far you got in the Hellgates down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to put them down in the comments below, or join the Discord, where you can ask questions, get build help, and hang out with the community. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. They're awesome, and they get to show it by having their name on screen in the credits of all my videos. So if you want to see your name here, be sure to check the link in the description. For more general gaming content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, and if you want a water bottle or a cool shirt, I have a link to my official merch shop in the description. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.